This is the Zoning and Design Review Board. It's June 9th. It is 6 o'clock, and we are in order. Could we have the roll call, please?
Member James.
Here.
Member Dornbecker.
Here.
Member Lamborn.
Here.
Member Stitt.
Here.
Chair Halliday.
Here.
All present.
Adoption of the agenda.
Move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. There were no minutes. And I will open it up to public comment. This is to discuss anything that is not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone that wants to make a statement? Seeing none, we will go on to public hearing. This is item number 8.1, design review at 2142 Padroni Street. Could we have the staff report?
The proposal before you is for redevelopment of the property at 2142 Padroni, and it consists of the demolition of the existing single-family residence, shown in the slide, and the detached accessory building to the rear. And it would be replaced with a new two-story house, single-family residence with a one-car attached garage. The lot is a relatively narrow parcel at just under 33 feet in width and about 100 feet in length, and it's approximately 3,314 square feet, which is significantly smaller than most other lots in the Old Town Historic District. The proposal is to construct a new 960 square foot residence, and it would include a 210 square foot one-car garage, a 167 square foot front porch that's open to above and through the archway on the left or the west, and would include a 16 square foot balcony and a 112 square foot roof deck that's over the garage. The residence is 25 feet in height, and it would be set back 19 feet from the front property line. The first story would be set back 5 feet from each property line, and the second story is stepped back so that it achieves an 8-foot setback from each property line, side property line. The rear setback is over 31 feet in length, and the fireplace on the west elevation is set back a little over 4 feet from the west side property line, and there's an elevator included to provide access to the second floor. The residence features a stone exterior, and it includes thick stone or concrete casings around the window and door openings. The glass windows and doors are metal, and they would be painted in the almond shade that was included in your packet. Other doors proposed are the wood doors for the garage, the front door, and the 2 gates on either side. The roof is a standing seam copper roof, and the gutters, downspouts, and chimney spark arrestor are also copper. This front elevation that you see here facing the street has the garage door on the right and the front entry porch on the left. And as I mentioned, it's open to above, and that second floor balcony overlooks it on the west side. On the east side is the deck on top of the roof. Access to the garage is via 2 concrete car tracks that lead up to it. And in front of the garage is a second proposed tandem parking stall. The landscaping at the front is time ground cover in and around the wheel strips and the pavers. The olive tree that's in the front yard would be moved 4 feet north approximately. It would be underplanted with lavender, and there are roses and other landscape elements in the front yard. The fences, as are mentioned in the staff report, are not aligned with property lines, and those will be moved in some locations. On the west side, the rear portion would be moved congruent with the property line, but the front portion, approximately the front 1/3, will be removed and left open, so it creates an open area with the neighbor and provides them access. The applicant's been in discussion with that neighbor and is in agreement as to that. On the east side, the applicant is also the property owner to the north one half on the side, and that property, or that fence will be realigned with the property line, generally near the pool area, but behind the garage it will be stepped back to create an area for a fountain. And at each of your seats were some illustrations of the fountains proposed. The purpose is to attenuate the sound from the pool equipment that's on that adjoining property. In the rear yard, we see another fountain at the rear property line with the same purpose, and it is a different linear design, also in your packet, and with others here for the public if they're interested. Within the backyard, there is a pergola or arbor that dominates the center area. It is not the 10 feet listed in the staff report, but approximately 8 feet in height, and it's arched to match the shape of the windows at the rear of the building. There is a fireplace that would be located on the east side, and it's within 5 feet of the side property line. And there are new trees proposed, 2 red maples to either side of the building, and 3 olives at the rear of the property. The staff report also indicates the various green measures these applicants are proposing, and it's a rather significant list of indoor finishes, structural materials, and appliances. Also in the staff report are the approval and consent of neighbors to the design, and the drawing has signatures of neighbors who have signed off on in their support. There's also a letter from a neighbor who couldn't attend tonight. And the property is in the Old Town Historic District. It was analyzed for compliance with those codes, and it generally meets those in all respects. The staff report shows the exemptions to the floor area ratio that are allowed, and it's 200 feet of the 210 square foot garage. It's the 16 square foot balcony on the west side of the front elevation, the 112 square foot deck on the east side of that elevation, and the 167 square foot front porch area. It includes the chimney, the water heater closet, the indoor stairwell, the second area that's open to above the feature indoors, and the elevator shaft, in addition to the landscape elements, the arbor and the fountains. It meets the other standards of the historic district for setback, for height, for roof pitch, and number of 2-story residences on the street. We find that the design meets the standards for the Old Town Historic District in that it's unique and high in quality and detail. And meets the parking requirements that allow garages in the front yard. And in this case, due to the very narrow nature of the lot, the one stall is more appropriate than a 2-star car that may dominate it, and is the reason a tandem parking situation is proposed and is supported by staff. Generally, just standard conditions are proposed with 2 exceptions. One relates to the height of the fences, and that's where we are suggesting that the written consent of all neighbors of adjoining properties where it would exceed the 6-foot limit for 8 feet, that written verification be submitted before it's installed. And the second relates to the wood-burning fireplaces, based on the fact that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has many no burn days in the winter, and they suggest either having a natural gas burning fireplace or an EPA approved wood burning device. And with those conditions, we support the project. And I'd just like to comment, it's where we see a set of drawings of this quality and as many areas addressed. So it's we think it's a nice improvement.
Thank you, Sandra. Do we have questions of staff? Not on? Yes.
Just one question. With respect to the proposed 8-foot fence, has it been represented to the applicant that with neighborhood acquiescence, an 8-foot fence would be approved?
Yes.
Anyone else? Questions of applicant? Do we have questions of the applicant? I'm going to, what?
Do you want a wood-burning fireplace in the yard?
Would you step up to the mic and introduce yourself, please, so we can get it into the record? Thank you.
My name is Charles Kanalakis, and
Hi, Charles.
I'm the applicant behind the applicant. Yes, we'd like both wood and gas-burning fireplaces at dual use if possible. Thank you.
And is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this matter?
Stephen Henderson, 1894 Larkspur Street, and a planning consultant. I've been working with Charles and Jill Kanalakis on their great new construction of their property here. And I'd like to present the project team that they've collected together. And Thayer Hopkins is the architect, along with Chris Lagos, and they've also retained local general contractor Glenn Silman, who's also a neighbor of the adjoining property. I guess a couple things to point out on the site plan primarily. Next slide. Yeah, is Michael Brooks conducted a lot survey, and there was a boundary line issue to the west side and to the northeast portion of the site. Luckily, the Kanalakis own the property that's off to the northeast, so it's easy to coordinate as working with the adjacent property owner, obviously. And Mr. Kanalakis has done a great job working with Mr. Hall, who owns the property of the west. And what I'd like to do is I'll turn that over to him, because he's really worked with Peter Hall as far as his idea of, instead of trying to retain all of his property, because you can see the lot line almost goes right along the house, and it catches the edge covered porch area there. And Mr. Kanalakis has done a great job as far as he wants to keep an open area in between the two houses and not construct a fence there, and more toward the rear of the property, establish the fence along the property line. And I'll turn that over to him to briefly describe that, because he's worked really well with the neighbors and getting sign-offs, et cetera. And I think we have a couple other photos as far as this is the existing fence line, and the proposal is to remove, and this is under the consent of the other property owners, to remove this flagstone planter area. And then the next slide, this is just a view along Padroni Street. And the next one, there's a rear accessory structure that'll be demolished and removed, legal non-conforming, just another rear photo there. And then I'll go ahead and turn it over to Charles here to describe his work with the neighbors.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I've had lengthy discussions with Peter Hall, and he's been very cooperative. The fence, as it stands now, is about 3 to 4 feet into the subject property's line, and our intention is to move the rear portion of it from Peter Hall's house to the back, back to the property line, and create a common area between the two houses for access for the fire department, for painters, roofers, and so forth. In the landscape plan, you'll see that there's 2 gates, one from our property and one from Peter Hall's. Oh, thank you. Yeah, a gate from our property and a gate from Peter Hall's property, and both properties will have access to this common area for moving out garbage cans and whatever happens. And the fence that's there now in this area will be removed, as Steve said, so will the planter, and the tree will be moved into a strategic place to create a bit of privacy between the two houses. We've discussed this with Peter, and he's happy with that. He still has an issue regarding his back porch here, which kind of overhangs the into our property. And I was saying to Peter that I volunteered to bear the cost of moving that back porch back a little bit, so that to give him a bit of daylight between the fence and the top of the edge of the porch. Peter's thinking about that, and I think what we'll do is wait and see how this turns out before we go ahead with it. As regards to the 8-foot fence, Peter has requested, it's not an 8-foot fence, sorry, a 6-foot fence plus 2 foot of lattice. He's requested that to happen, so I'm sure I'll get his approval to do that. And the other neighbors similarly. The only neighbor we really haven't spoken to is the people who use the hot air balloon, has the hot air balloon company, and has the container located here. We haven't been able to get in touch with him just yet, but I don't see that they're particularly impacted on this project. All the other neighbors have basically signed, who are directly impacted, have signed off.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. I'm Thayer Hopkins again, and with Chris Lagos, we are the architects for this project. And I don't want to reiterate or take up any more of your time than necessary, but I thought I might review just a couple of things about the iteration of the design and the directives from Charlie and Jill Kanellakis. First, setting a neighborhood context, we looked with Charlie and Jill over a number of neighborhood walks at structures in the area. And the map is a little hard to see because it's reduced here, but it was Charlie and Jill's desire from the inception really to do a stone house if that would be possible, and that's not a directive we often are given by a client, and it's a wonderful palette to begin with. So we looked at stone structures in the area, and the subject site is right there. It's in red, which is hard to see, and there are dotted around the area, you can see stone structures which include, on the left, are full stone structures and include masonry here, which became, to some degree, in part a model for our structure, and a couple of stone residences which are in the immediate neighborhood. There are also, in this section you can see, and they're coded by symbol, which is hard to make out here, structures which have stone accents, such as low-lying walls. And the third category would be here, which is sort of partial facades, in which case you might have a porch that is in stone, or a part of a facade that takes up to a certain level of stone and then is stucco up above, as is the case in the restaurant here. We, with that, we looked, the main issue, I think, of our challenge was a tight site and having a program that included 2 full bedrooms and bath and an open central space that gave a small structure a sense of something sort of larger that is inside the envelope. And Steve, if you could give me the site section, or the building section, pardon me. That would be great. Thank you. You can see here in a section taken through the middle of the structure. It was Charlie and Jill's desire from the beginning to have a ground floor that had the entry and the garage, and then a foyer area and a sort of a big open room, kitchen and dining, that really gave on to the rear yard and had a very strong connection to the outdoor, because there's an envisionment of living in this structure where the garden becomes a part of the house and vice versa. And they've given a great deal of thought to the landscape as an extension of that space. And then and then in the center of which would be this two-story open area, which had to be factored into the total envelope, which was a very tight fit, and which we worked on for some number of months with them, sort of massaging this back and forth. So in essence, the rear of the house has one large room, a kitchen, living room, and dining room, and then up above you have you have bedrooms on either end, each with a bath, connected by a walkway, which becomes a sort of balcony. Part of the directive of the program was to have an elevator for full access for anyone who was physically disabled, and with that, we generated. Thank you. You can see the longitudinal section here, with on the left being the front of the property towards the south, and then the garage. And here's the front bedroom, which has a deck off, which was mentioned in the planning report. Partially to the bedroom is as small as it could be. We were really skinning these spaces down to meet the requirements of area, but that had a sense. The deck performs two functions in our mind. It gives the ability to have a small bedroom have a wonderful outdoor space, but it also breaks down the massing as you perceive it from the street, and we were very concerned about that fact. So we broke the facade at the front with a double wall, in essence, this being the front of the garage, and then towards the west becomes an arched opening through which you enter to an outdoor area that precedes the front door. And then the second floor wall is set back, so that our setbacks in the front exceed what the minimum is by, I think, 9 feet in each case. And then at the rear, we have a vertical wall. Steve, if you'd show me the rear elevation for a moment, that would be great. Side up. Thank you very much. In looking at stone buildings, we looked at traditional prototypes and precedents, and stone, I think, articulates itself differently than wood, obviously, but also demands sometimes a kind of a different massing. And so we looked at a number of buildings, not only in the area, but historically, that we might draw from. And this has almost, at some moments, an Italian reference to. There are certain buildings in Italy, even cathedrals with high clerestory windows that emit light, which would be that from the north, and then a big arched opening that leads to the garden. Stone has a certain feeling of mass, and so you want to support it in a way that has a great deal of area around it. Otherwise, it feels as though openings are going to be crushed, I think. There's a different proportionality than is true in wood. So we looked at those sorts of factors in realizing this house. And again, part of the palette of materials that Charlie and Jill not only asked that we have, but really directed us to, which is a great gift, I will say, to an architect, is a copper standing seam roof and exposed stained wood trim. And the windows, which would be metal. We're examining different manufacturers, either steel or aluminum, but shop primed and finished in that almond color that we would have. And Maisonry has a very similar palette to it. The stone itself, we have, I hope we haven't destroyed your furniture, but we have some samples here of the stone. And actually, this stone exists on an immediately neighboring property on a low-lying wall that is approximately 3 feet high. So we're, again, looking for neighborhood context and consistency. Our total palette here, which was, I think you received pieces of in your materials, includes an example of a patinated copper roof after some years, several examples. That is a copper roof with stone coining on the side in a stucco structure, but obviously we would have stone all the way across the facade. The center section is light fixtures. We're looking at a couple of options. I believe this was actually also taken from the neighboring property, and that is not just a light fixture, but is also representative of the stone. And on the far right, that is that wall from the neighboring property, and we would be looking at the exact same stone for continuity. I think with that unless there are any particular questions, I would wrap up by saying that there was a set of, again, a wonderful gift to us. Instead of sort of proselytizing to a client, they were proselytizing to us and saying, now you will put these green features in this project. And they gave us a list which they'd researched as a family. And that's a wonderful sort of a philosophical way to approach a design project. And we are all on board with that and have loved working on this project. And I'll finish off with just leave the sort of iconic image of watercolor rendering that Chris did for this project, which indicates I think it's the feel of what we are trying to achieve as kind of an iconic image from the front. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question on the, well done on the overall design. I just love it. But the fence, how do you feel about the 8-foot fence? Is it going to make give you a sense of tunnel vision? I notice you don't have it demonstrated on this image here.
No, because it's really a side yard issue in part. On the side to the west, the structure that's existing is very close. In fact, the property line is antecedent, is sort of all over the place with respect to the fence, and the structure is looms, you know. So on that side, Charlie, as he mentioned, has done a great deal of negotiation with the neighbor. And so in that instance, I believe the neighbor even requested a fence that would be high for mutual privacy. And I think that the solidity of that fence up to 6 feet with the latticework trellis above helps to break that down in an appropriate way. I think that the 6-foot height is kind of a visual thing, and you don't quite see, unless you have basketball players in your family, you know, people's heads above that, but then the additional feet, the additional 2 feet is open to a degree that helps that. If it were a solid 8-foot fence, I think it would be a matter of concern, but the 6-foot is a very precise dimension that I think if you're a little lower than that, you're sort of seeing over into people's yards, and from what I understand from Charlie, that I think it's pretty much a mutual concern about privacy. So with those stipulations, I think that those are, you know, in other words, that it breaks down, it becomes more transparent in the 6 to 8 foot band. It works, in my view.
And then as far as lighting, are you going to have any uplighting around the house? Are you going to light some of the landscaping, or?
Yes, actually, the landscape lighting is there is a landscape lighting plan, which I believe is a part of the package. Mostly low-lying, shielded, ground lights, and then we have fixtures on the front of the building itself, which are here, which are lantern-type fixtures that have a would give a glow, but would not be a directional type fixture. You know, would light the facade and that immediate area on the facade, but wouldn't be a glare issue in our mind. I know that spill light and skylight is a huge concern in a community like this. You could sort of destroy the feeling, the bucolic feeling of a small street easily by uplighting a tree or doing something like that. We're not doing that in any instance. And actually, the landscape architect with whom I worked before, but again, Charlie and Jill found, and when they said, well, we found a landscape architect, we'd worked with them in West Marin, a wonderful husband and wife couple, and they also had done masonry, so they're, have a great deal of local knowledge and familiarity with the neighborhood in that way, and legitimate concern, I think, for those issues of not overlighting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to this matter?
Could I just add about the fence? The landscape plan would be good. There is no fence here. There's a screen of citrus trees, which are owned by Bud and Barbara over here, and we're removing the fence up to this gate area, and the fence doesn't start till here. And this fence really doesn't start till there, then dog legs in and goes on from here. So from the street, the 8-foot fences will not be visible.
Oh, good point. Thanks.
All right. I'm going to close the public meeting and bring it back to the board. We have discussion. John?
I'll start off. I thought everything appeared to be in conformance with the city standards. I appreciated the fact that they got the full setback for the garage. The side yard's very tight, but they worked directly with both neighbors. And I think for this very narrow lot, having owned one in the past, it's very difficult, very challenging, and I just think they've really addressed all important issues on the project. I'm really happy with it overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've really done their homework on this and addressed all the issues before even coming to us. I really appreciate the natural stone on the building, how it's balanced, the symmetry. I like everything about it. I'm a little uncertain about the lighting on the front of the building. I understand it's not shielded source. Okay, so and not having much experience with lighting, I would like to hear a little bit more about that when you have a chance. And the landscaping's nice. It's zoned well for the sunny side versus the shady side, and all that's covered really nicely. And that's it.
Thank you, Matt. Marita?
I just want to compliment you on the design. I think it's lovely and will be a very nice addition to the historic part of town. Congratulations.
Nothing to add.
Okay, and I think as far as the property line, that is not our purview. Am I correct? That's a matter for the title company that we are,
Right, you're not setting the property line, their surveyor is doing that.
right. Otherwise, what a huge improvement. It looks like everybody's dream house. Congratulations. Could I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the project as presented with the attendant conditions of approval.
And I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, you're good. Nicely done. Under review, somewhere along the line, because Sandra, I wanted to discuss a mission statement, and I know it's not been agendized, but could we squeeze that in somewhere along the line and not
Why don't we
vote
do
on
that staff and board report?
it? Okay, go. Nice.
And you can start with that if you want.
I'm sorry.
You can start with that one at the board reports if you want. We'll dive right into it.
Do you want to start with the board, or do you want me to do this thing?
Well, I thought since you have something in mind.
There's something in mind. I have felt all along that we need a mission statement. And I thought before we even made one, we should decide whether we want one or not. But in lieu of that, I wrote a little something, which we can't even vote on or discuss, but we could take it home and agendize it for the next meeting. How does anybody feel about that? I sense disapproval.
I'm not saying a word, Matt.
I think mission statements are constraining for
Well,
this type of board.
so you don't want a mission statement, is that what you're saying?
I'm not going to be here next time. That's going to be up to you.
How would it be if I pass this out?
I'd love to read it.
Yeah, it's not written in stone. This is written in
Paper.
invisible ink. And you can either accept it, correct it, or decide we really don't want this thing. Sandra, one for you,
Please, thank you.
and I don't need one. You want two? One for each hand? No. Okay.
Maybe for the public?
You want one? Sure. Okay. And from there on, we'll go on to staff and board reports.
I'll share it with everybody else.
I think we can just postpone that until next
Okay.
session.
So,
It's just a jumping,
received.
yeah, just a
Okay.
jumping off spot.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is thank Member James and Member Stitt for serving on the board, both of their terms are expiring, and so we appreciate you for the service you did into Yountville, into this board. I understand Jason's reapplied, so we're happy to see your interest continue and
Thank you.
hope that you may remain on the board, and we're obviously sad to see you go. We think
Oh,
you
it
had
was-
a nice, really good
Yeah, I think he needs
engineering
a
perspective,
gold
and human
watch.
perspective.
It was enjoyable working with everybody, honestly, and especially I really enjoyed your reports. They just got better and better
That's true.
every time, and so I think I'm really happy they hired you too. It's been you've been a great adjunct to the department.
Well, I'm going to miss you, John.
Oh, I'm around.
Okay.
I'm still
You'll
there.
still come to the parties.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And I think we'd like to recognize your service at town council, so we'll let you know when that'll be, and
Oh,
we'll provide
thank you.
with the plaque, and
Oh,
Well,
wow, that's just a piece
we'll
of
let the
paper
rest
is
of the board
fine.
know. And so, at the meeting on, I believe it's June 16th, the next one in June, the council will be considering the applicants and appointing 2 new members to the board. So when we meet again in July, we'll have a new board, and we'll also be re-electing a chairman at that point. So that's something to consider at that meeting. I guess what's going on in the planning department, we're seeing a lot fewer applications. In fact, this is the last one we have in the lineup, and so we'll finally have an opportunity to move to more long-range planning. And in July, we plan to take sort of a bucket of issues to the council to see what their what they favor having done first, and then we'll come back to this board and start discussing those issues while we work with revisions to the zoning and design ordinances. So, and then the projects that are in town, we received a building permit today for the Sorrento project, so that's moving forward, and I'm sure you've noticed it's been demolished, the old building there, so it's pretty exciting. At the council's last meeting, they approved the Knight project, the final master development plan, which you saw this last time. So they're excited to move ahead. They actually came back with a revision to the site plan, which moved the parking up to the front of the building, which they were planning on screening behind a green landscape wall. And what that does is allow more yards to all sides of the building and creates a nicer environment, we think, for tenants and people who reside there. And the only other really interesting project was the wine tasting and retail at the Whistle Stop Center. And that was, the retail were culinary products, and the applicants had a lot of passion, and the council really supported that and let them know this is a model project for wine tasting plus retail, and they hope it is illustrative of what's hopefully to come. So that's what's going on at our end. And if you have any questions, I could perhaps answer them.
Well, I do beg all your patience, excuse me, particularly in light of there are fewer applications, and there's been talk about cleaning up the zoning and design ordinances. This past project in particular, in my view, brought up several items highlighted to me that are persistent problems that need, in my view, to be addressed. I didn't bring them up to this application because I didn't think, for a variety of reasons, it was appropriate to try to burden them, or given the unique character of the lot, the differences were. But nonetheless, these come up for me all the time. One is, what is tandem parking? It's not defined or addressed at all in the ordinance, and I think it should be. The City of Napa's model is tandem parking can be used for guest parking. We don't require for residences guest parking. We don't use that metric. But I think the ordinance needs to address tandem parking. Is it allowed? Is it not allowed? Is it allowed in some cases? We're left to decide whether it's a valid parking spot. The second thing is, what is screen parking? Residences are supposed to provide, one covered and one screen parking spot. The meaning of screened, I think, has become meaningless, and maybe that's okay. But I think we need to talk about what, in fact, does screen mean. Does that mean you're not supposed to see the car from the street? Because that's certainly not what it's meant in practice. And again, maybe that's okay, but it's not happening. The third item is the underground ordinance in the municipal code exempts replacement dwellings from undergrounding requirements, and I don't think that's right. I think we should have a metric that's something like the commercial for fire sprinklers if you remodel more than 50%. Part of my thinking there is, A, we're going to continue to see a lot of projects like this, replacement dwellings, and it could be with land acquisition, an $800, $1 million project, and well, given my occupation, I'm very sensitive to cost. For another $5,000 or $10,000, we're not delivering the service lines. That is what's from the street to the structures underground. And it kind of galls me to see projects be done and not be forced to do what everyone else to do. And we're schizophrenic. If there's a parcel map, we'll say, okay, the existing dwelling, you need to put say a lot split, you need to put the utilities underground to that existing dwelling and the new one, even though you're not even touching the existing dwelling. Moreover, I think we can all agree there's a long-term benefit. Let's get utilities underground. It's going to require a lot of different people. The town for the distribution, or large developments put the the distribution lines underground. But when we're just going to continue to see new houses with overhead, I don't think that's right. So I'll get off of that. Next, the 2 stories. This is just my personal axe to grind. I think there can be a great argument to limiting 2 stories, but I really dislike the way the ordinance is written because I think it's capricious. It says, today I can have a 2-story, tomorrow you can't. I think there are better ways to do it, whether it be rewarding 1 stories or penalizing 2 stories, but not simply that says, because the guy last week built a 2-story, you now can't. I think it's just manifestly unfair. I think we can do it in different ways and get the same result. Again, as I say, a reward or a penalty or both. Next to last, thanks for your patience, fireplaces, another kind of personal axe to grind. I agree that one of the many, and I have the book from Bay Area Air Quality, one of the many ways to reduce particulate matter is to restrict fireplaces. But again, we're completely schizophrenic about it. Master development plans, we say no fireplaces that are not gas. One building at a time, we often allow wood-burning fireplaces, replacement dwellings. So I've seen in town, I think in the past couple of years, 8 new wood-burning fireplaces. But yet someone and I may not be the most unbiased observer here, but someone maybe who has 3 or 4, none are allowed. So are 8 or 10 approved one at a time less burdensome or a risk to 3 or 4 approved at once? So if we want to make a policy about wood-burning fireplaces, I think it needs to be uniform. Lastly, and again, I beg your patience, the only reason I didn't bring this up, and that was my question to you, Sandra, is that the applicant had been told if they got neighborhood acquiescence on the 8-foot fence. I think that's, I don't want to say improper, but the ordinance says no fences, screening, hedges shall be higher than 8 feet. And then the ordinance defines shall as mandatory, compulsory, and not discretionary. So I don't think it's really up to us to decide whether an 8-foot fence is okay. I think it would have been unfair to the applicant to say, no, we're going to unwind what you've been told for several months. And maybe 8-foot fences are okay when they're interior demising fences. But I don't think this is the way to handle it. I think it's either change the ordinance or maybe refine it such that the top 2 feet need to allow some natural light. But I don't think we can just say, well, if all your neighbors agree, it's okay, because that's not what the ordinance says. So again, thanks for your patience.
Well, on that particular one, anyway, it was a 6-foot fence with the lattice that does allow light through.
I gave that as an example of a way the ordinance can be modified, but what the ordinance says is no fence, screening, or landscaping. So the lattice is a fence. Whether it's solid, maybe we can talk about. And maybe that's a revision to the ordinance to say 6-foot solid, but 6 to 8 feet can be open lattice. Something other than shall, mandatory, not discretionary, but if your neighbors agree. I object to that.
It kind of leaves the city exposed to not being consistent throughout the town. Yeah. It should be modified if we're going to allow it.
And I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
agree with you.
Thanks for letting me
All really great points. Thank you.
get on my
for letting us know
soapbox.
those.
Those are good
We
points.
like that, so we would encourage any of you to give us your comments as well. So,
Good
Let's do
points,
it.
consistency in the codes.
Well said.
Will I hear a motion?
I don't think so. I
All
don't
motion
think-
to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I
Good
can't
meeting.
believe it's only 6:45. That's incredible.